cars couldn't always drive themselves. Before the days of Tesla, I would have never imagined a car could drive itself. It seems today, technology is becoming more and more a part of our lives. It's not something that we can escape, it's second nature. But when I was a kid, fancy cars like that were only seen on the Jetsons. The memory had escaped my mind until just recently when my sister and I visited our childhood house. The new owners were extremely nice and let us sit in the yard for a while, reminiscing about days when we would run barefoot through the grass, getting itchy bumps from mosquito bites, and all the years of hay fever. I sat in the grass, itching my legs against the straw-like lawn, and looked out into the cul-de-sac. I laughed, watching a car drive by, seeing the red brake lights bounce off the street as they pulled up to the stop sign. "What's up?" my sister asked me, pulling a blade of grass from the dirt, chewing on the white end. "Do you remember that one time the weird car kept driving around our street?" my sister interrupted me. "I was just thinking about that." I was 7, my sister was about 9 when we saw that car. We were out on the lawn rolling through the dandelions, making wishes on the puffy ones. We got bored of that and just started talking. I can't really remember about what. I do remember picking up a rock with my toe when the car drove by. I don't know why I stopped to watch it, but I did. It was a weird color, not quite brown or gray or green, but at the same time, all three. It passed the house and up to the stop sign, blinker signaling it was turning left. The car turned and I didn't pay it any more attention. My focus went back to the rock between my toes, trying to pass it to my other foot. When I heard another car, it hissed and groaned as it drove by. I looked up and saw the same brown, gray, green color, making me drop the rock. I felt my head cock to the side as I watched it, again pull up to the stop sign and signal left, pulling back onto the main road and out of sight. "Hey!" I called, smacking my sister on the arm. "Wait," my sister said, throwing my hand off of her. "No, look, watch!" I urged, pointing down the street where I knew the car would show back up. "Stop it!" my sister grumbled. She held a yellow dandelion between her fingers, the majority of its petals gone. He loves me not." She pulled off the last 2 petals. "Dang it." She chucked the flowerless stem away from us and turned toward me. "What?" "Look," I whispered. I watched my sister's eyes follow my pointing finger. The car came back again, and this time we both watched it drive by. The driver was a man, just a regular guy. He had on a hat, and his arms were stiff in front of him, perfectly at 10 and 2. His eyes never left the road, and his back was completely straight in the driver's seat. Our heads turned in unison, watching as he pulled up to the stop sign for the 3rd time, his left blinker flashing red every other second. "I don't get it," my sister grumbled, picking up another dandelion. "Just wait," I giggled, the idea of the car driving around and around making me bounce. I tucked my legs up under myself and searched down the street, waiting to see the brown, gray, green car putt along. I felt the stiff blades of grass stab the tips of my bouncing fingers as I watched. There was nothing in sight but empty road. Heat waves slithered in the air above the black pavement, distorting my unblinking eyes. I started to see double the longer I stared at the same spot on the road, having to roll my eyes back into focus. He has to come back, I remembered thinking, like he was playing some sort of game with me. "You're weird," my sister sighed, going to stand up. I grabbed her arm and pulled her back into the grass. "Just wait," I insisted, crawling onto my knees. My sister crossed her arms and collapsed onto her back, looking up at the passing clouds. I stayed right where I was, listening. There was a gentle hum of cars in the distance, but the other car sounded different. It spat out exhaust, the engine threatening to stall at any moment. I didn't realize that noise as a kid, but I've heard it one too many times with my current jalopy. There! I squealed in excitement, pointing again down the road. My sister barely lifted her head as she saw the car drive by. She sat fully up when she recognized it as the same car from last time. Do they live around here? She asked. I shook my head. I've never seen that car before. This is the 4th time it's come around. We watched the man drive by again. That time, only one hand was on the wheel, right on 10 o'clock. He still sat as straight as ever, eyes sticking to the windshield. He rolled to a stop by the sign at the corner and turned on his left blinker. That's not the new ice cream man, is it? I asked, my child brain thinking that the sputtering sound was static of an old radio trying to play the ice cream song. Stop, my sister hushed. The jovial curiosity drained from my innocent brain as I looked over at my sister. She was sitting straight up and her brows were furrowed. I watched her look down the street of our neighborhood, silently counting the cars in each driveway and mumbling to herself about how Mr. Patrickson gets home at 5 and the Garsons are on vacation. It wasn't until we were older that she explained to me what she was doing. My older sister has always been, and always will be, a worrywart. She was the one that yelled "car" when we were playing in the street, making everyone step aside and into the grass. She knew who lived where, when curfew was, and being the neighborhood paper girl, she knew almost everyone's morning routine. Maybe he's looking for a house, I remember asking, watching the car turn left again. He didn't look like he was looking, my sister whispered. Maybe we should get Mom. Why? I asked, screwing up my face. It's just a car. Sure, at that age I knew all about stranger danger, and to never talk to people I didn't know, but this was different. The guy was just driving around like some weird merry-go-round. He didn't stop by our house or try to talk to us, so I figured there was no need to worry. It was my sister's turn to look down the street, waiting to see the car drive through our neighborhood for a 5th time. She was now on her knees too, neck stretching to see down the road. I didn't remember when she had scooted closer to me, but she was right by my side. Her hand snapped over mine when we saw the car appear around the curve. Something about it looked different that time. My 7-year-old brain didn't spot the difference right away, but my sister did. She grabbed my arm and started to shuffle backward toward our house. I tugged my arm back, making her pause and watch with me. It looked like there was more room in the car than last time. I could see the man clearer than before. He had on a gray shirt that almost blended in with the seat. As the car rounded the bend by our house, I leaned forward, squinting into the sun. I could see perfectly into the window and right through the driver's side. His jacket was flat against his chest. His arms are gone, I gasped. It wasn't just like he had his hands in his lap or that he wasn't holding onto the wheel. His arms were completely gone. The fabric that once hung around his bicep was ripped off, strands of shredded fabric hanging loosely by his torso. Despite there being nothing touching the steering wheel, I saw it gently turn, making the car hug the curve of the road. The brake lights lit up, and the blinker pulsed like it always did. My head flung from the car to my sister, looking for an answer. We should go inside, my sister mumbled, watching after the car. How did it do that? I asked, completely forgetting that the man suddenly had no arms. It drove by itself. I don't know, my sister shrugged, standing up. Let's go inside. No, I want to see, I whined, shrugging out of my sister's grasp. Look! I clapped, excited to see the self-driving car come back around. Again, something was different, but this time it wasn't exciting. I felt my smile sink into a straight line as my sister shrunk back down to her knees. The car was a mess. The front bumper was being dragged under the vehicle and sparks were flung into the air as it screamed across the pavement. The hood was crinkled like a piece of tinfoil up into the windshield. We looked through the spider-veined glass as the car drove back up the street. The man was completely gone. There was no one in the driver's seat, just a stained chair with a broken headrest. The bent tires screeched over the road, moving the car closer to our house. As it turned, my eyes grew, and it felt like my stomach was going to come out of my mouth. The man was in the back seat, hiding from view behind the passenger side. His back was still straight and his arms still missing, his eyes now staring into the back of the passenger seat headrest. I gently lifted my finger and pointed. "There," I whispered to my sister. As if he heard me, the man's head snapped to the side. The tip of his nose was pressed against the window. Little circles of breath puffed out from his nostrils onto the glass. His eyes were round, white, and locked onto mine. I felt the color drain from my face. It was the first time I ever experienced real fear. Fear, not from a movie or a nightmare, but from an actual person in front of me. I remember my sister saying something, but my ears had started to ring. Everything outside of mine and the man's locked vision seemed to fade away. It didn't even look like he had eyelids, just round orbs smashed into his skull. His head slowly pivoted as the car continued to move, gaze never leaving my sister and me. At one point, I expected him to turn back to look at the road, but he never did. His neck twisted at an unnatural angle until his head was completely turned around. At the age of 7, I knew heads didn't turn all the way around like that. I remember thinking he looked like an owl, his body facing forward while his eyes stayed glued behind him. The headrest on his seat covered the lower half of his face, stopping right below his eyes. Even as he pulled up to the stop sign, I could see the white orbs glowing inside the shadowed car. It didn't even look like he had color to them, just black dots in the center of white ping pong balls. I couldn't look away, and I don't think my sister could either. We just sat there watching the man that was watching us. The car pulled up to the stop sign, and I saw the red brake lights flash on for a second. Despite the distance between us, I could hear the gears grind together as it shifted into park. I don't know how it shifted. The man was still in the back seat, but the car was now frozen on the road. I remember counting my heartbeats as it sat there. 1, 2, 3. The car door opened. I heard the snap of a door handle being released, and the rusted hinges screamed. 4, 5, 6. I saw his foot fall out of the open door, the heel of his boot thunking against the steaming pavement. 7, 8, 9. He never blinked, not once. His round, piercing eyes made me feel something my 7-year-old self couldn't understand. It made me feel like I had ants under my skin, like something was crawling in my chest. The creepy crawly feeling went up the back of my neck and exploded over my scalp, threatening to push through my pores. At 7 years old, I just thought that was fear, but now I understand it was more than that. It was an adult emotion that my kid body couldn't understand. Dread. My 10th heartbeat was when he started to throw himself out of the car. I couldn't tell if it was his vehicle creaking from the shift in weight or if it was the man's bones. I watched his joints snap into place as he wrenched himself out into the sunlight. There was a split second where the car's siding obstructed our locked stair, and that was when my sister pulled me back. I fell onto my butt and blinked tears into my drying eyes, finally being able to look away. I saw the man stand fully out of his car, but I didn't dare look at him. The shadow of his body in my peripheral vision was awkward and broken. I heard one ragged drag of his approaching foot before I let out a whimper. I scrambled to get my feet under myself as my sister dragged me across the lawn and into the house. "Do you remember what Mom and Dad said?" my sister asked me, bringing me back to present day. I looked down and saw my grown legs and flexed my adult fingers, thankful that it was just a memory playing in my head and that I hadn't really been brought back to that day. I threw the handful of ripped grass blades back into the lawn. I don't even remember if we told them or not. I curled my legs up into my chest just like I always did as a child, wrapping my arms around me. What could that have even been? My sister just shrugged, running her hands back and forth over her mouth in thought. The neighborhood had changed quite a bit from when we were little, but the road was the same. It seemed to have been forgotten by the village, the potholes, the discolored marks, still the same from when I remembered them. And the stop sign, that was still there too. It was weathered and a bit bent from previous accidents, but it was still there on the corner. I shook away the shudder that was starting to crawl up my spine and stood up, brushing off the seat of my pants. We had overstayed our welcome. The grass was smashed down where we had been sitting. We got into my car and pulled out of the driveway. Another wave of nostalgia flowing over my brain at the familiar view of my childhood driveway. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, growing nauseous as I pulled up to the stop sign. Old graffiti marks became visible on the red iron sign as my car lurched to a halt. I flipped on my blinker. The little arrow pointing to the left as I went to pull back onto the main street from our neighborhood. I couldn't help but look at the car behind us through my rearview mirror, its brown-gray-green color looking oddly familiar.